So he can find everything. He's honest. He publishes the honest results, but then his conclusions for public consumption is that fluoridation is fine and dandy. So now it's time, I think, to talk about dental fluorosis. In November of 2010, the CDC published fluorosis data for the whole of the United States. And this is what they found, that 41%, I've given you the figure before, but I want you to see the breakdown. 41% of American children aged 12 to 15 had some form of dental fluorosis. 28.5% had very mild, 8.6% had mild, and 3.6% had either moderate or severe. Now these names are a little misleading because I want to show you what this dental fluorosis actually looks like. So this is very mild dental fluorosis. This impacts up to 25% of the tooth surface. At one end of the spectrum, it's little white spots on the cusp of the teeth, and at the other end of the spectrum, the worst cases of very mild is this, where 25% of the tooth surface is impacted. And mild, and this impacts 8.6% of American kids between 12 and 15 have up to 50% of the enamel impacted. And moderate and severe looks like this, where 100% of the tooth enamel is impacted, and that impacts 3.6% of American children between 12 and 15. And believe me, children that have this condition do not like to smile, do not like to smile when they go to school, do not like to smile on their first date because they know it puts their boyfriends and peers off when they do. People immediately assume that these kids are not looking after their teeth. So think of the psychological damage to a teenager entailed by this. So I now want to talk about the story of two relationships. A little bit of history here, for those who like history. The father of fluoridation was Trenley Dean of the US Public Health Service. And he published this famous 21-city study in 1942. And this study purports to show that as the level of fluoride in the water goes up, the tooth decay in these 21 cities go down. So there's 21 dots there representing 21 cities. And this is the graph which launched fluoridation. But wait a moment. A number of scientists, including Ziegelbecker from Austria, said, wait a moment, why did he only use 21 cities? He had data from hundreds of cities. Why didn't he use all the data? And what Ziegelbecker proceeded to do was to plot the results if you put in all the data points that he could find in America and in Europe, and now it's completely flat. There is no relationship between the level of fluoride in the drinking water and dental decay. No, it disappears. Relationship disappears. Now, did Dean do this deliberately or not? I don't know. But now look at the other relationship. He does the same thing for dental fluorosis. And here you see a very clear relationship. The more fluoride in the water, the more dental fluorosis that you have. So one relationship is very robust, very strong. The relationship between fluoride and dental fluorosis. The other relationship between fluoride absorption in the water and tooth decay is very weak. Now, that's data from 1981. Let's look at data from that National Dental Research study I told you about. Okay, here's the level of fluoride in the water, okay? The first bunch of data is for communities less than 0.3. The second one is between 0.3 and 0.7. Next one's 0.7 to 1.2, that's the artificial fluoridation, and then greater than 1.2. Look at the relationship with dental fluorosis. Very clear. 14.6, 19.6, 25.2, 40.5% of the children impacted. Now look at the relationship with dental decay. 55.5, 54.6, 54.4, 56.4. Negligible differences in tooth decay. One relationship is robust, the other is extremely weak. but it's that weak relationship which has been used to promote fluoridation. Other health concerns, I've got to be quick now because I notice I'm now 5 minutes over, so let me try to get the rest done in 5 minutes. The National Research Council report produced a groundbreaking report in 2006. It was groundbreaking because the first time ever they used a balanced panel, not a panel selected to produce a self-fulfilling prophecy of pro-fluoridation experts, but a panel of balance. They had 3 pro-fluoridation, 3 anti-fluoridation, and 6 uncommitted scientists on this panel. It took them 3.5 years, and their final report was 507 pages with 1,100 references. It is the most comprehensive look at fluoride toxicology ever undertaken. Now, the fluoridation promoters have done their best to downplay or completely ignore this report. On the day it was published, the ADA, the American Dental Association, declared that it was irrelevant to water fluoridation, erroneously claiming that the NRC panel concerned itself only with water containing fluoride at 4 parts per million. 6 days later, Tweedledum said the same thing. The Oral Health Division, CDC, declared the findings of the NRC report are consistent with CDC's assessment that water is safe and healthy at the levels used for water fluoridation. Poppycock! Absolute poppycock. If you look at that report, Chapter 2 is an exposure analysis. And in that exposure analysis, they concluded that certain subsets of the population were exceeding the EPA's safe reference dose for fluoride of 0.06 milligrams per kilogram per day. That's the IRIS level. Drinking fluoridated water at 1 part per million. And those subsets of the population included bottle-fed babies and high water drinkers and people with kidney dysfunction. Now, what's interesting here, if that's true, that 0.06 is based upon a level to protect against dental fluorosis. But the ATSDR, the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, had a lower level to protect against bone fractures, 0.05. So if that was the case, exceeded 0.06, obviously it exceeded the levels of which they felt was necessary to protect bones. Now, elsewhere in this thing, this is the conclusion of this. They have a whole chapter on the brain. It is apparent that fluorides have the ability to interfere with functions of the brain. Several lines of information indicate an effect of fluoride exposure on thyroid function. The chairman of the panel, Dr. John Doole, in an interview with Scientific American, he said, "The thyroid changes do worry me. There are some things that need to be explored." Chapter 5 dealt with the bone, and all members of the committee agreed that there is scientific evidence that under certain conditions, fluoride can weaken bone and increase the risk of fractures. Now, a study from Mexico, they showed that there was a very strong correlation between the severity of dental fluorosis in children and bone fractures in both children and adults. And this effect is being noticed between no dental fluorosis and very mild dental fluorosis. The methodology of that study has been challenged, but no attempt has been made in any fluoridated country to reproduce that study, nor, more importantly, to use this technique of using the severity of dental fluorosis as a biomarker of exposure, which would be a wonderful thing to do with many childhood concerns. There was a study published in China by an American group, Li et al., looking at hip fracture rates in 6 villages of increasing fluoride concentration. Village 3 was about 1 part per million. And you'll see that at this level, between 1.5 and 2.9 parts per million, the hip fracture rates doubled. Slightly decreased for the next village and tripled at village 6. Now, what has happened here is that people have said this is the only statistically significant result, therefore you can ignore those other 2 data points. But we plotted them out, and we reckon I think it's reasonable that what we're looking at here is a linear trend. And although the head fracture rates that doubled here may not be statistically significant, but they seem to be part of a trend. And by the way, it is on the basis of this study by Lee and others that the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry came up with that standard of 0.05. And to add irony to irony, ATSDR is a part of the Center of Disease Control. So the Center of Disease Control, who said that this report was irrelevant to water fluoridation, their own scientists in the Center of Disease Control were saying essentially that people are exceeding the safe reference dose. This is what John Dewell said after this review, the chairman of the NRC report. What the committee found is that we've gone with the status quo regarding fluoride for many years, for too long really, and now we need to take a fresh look. In the scientific community, people tend to think this is settled. I mean, when the US Surgeon General comes out and says this is one of the top 10 greatest achievements of the 20th century, that's a hard hurdle to get over. But when we looked at the studies that have been done, we found that many of these questions are unsettled and we have much less information than we should, considering how long this fluoridation has been going on. In other words, you're clearly looking at an experiment that's been conducted on the American population for over 60 years. I will save this discussion of the lousy science that's not being done, the science that's not being done in this country till tomorrow as part of the spin stuff. And I think I'll stop there for questions, but when you've asked a few questions, I want to, before the end, talk about what we can do to end this nonsense, but more of that tomorrow. So let's go into questions. I'm sorry, I'm 10 minutes out. Yes, at the back.
Yeah, does a carbon block water filter, will that take out the chlorine, or what is our best source of taking the chlorine out of the water?
A good question. Okay, the cheap filters, the carbon filters, the aqua, the Brita filters, do not remove fluoride. To remove fluoride, there's several techniques. You can use distillation. You can use reverse osmosis, but if you use reverse osmosis, make sure you have the water tested because they're not consistent. Some do, some don't. Some do it well, some do it badly, depending on flow rate. Another one that I particularly like from that I've seen in Australia and live with is ion exchange, where you have a cation exchange and an anion exchange, and you get pretty good water. It's very fast, and the beauty of the system is the moment that the ions start to come through, the conductivity goes up and you know you've got to change the cartridge. So a mixture of cation and anion exchanges. And lastly, much cheaper, in California they are marketing a filter made of bone char. Bone attracts fluoride. So if you get charred bone, it will absorb the fluoride. And I think they use alumina as well. All of these systems are expensive, and they don't protect you when you go downtown and have a meal. They don't protect you when you're at work, and they don't protect you when you're at a friend's house. So really the only way to protect yourself is to organize politically to get this nonsense out. And I would say this. This is, of all the environmental health issues, this is the easiest one to end. All you need is a strong wrist. Just turn off the spigot at the waterworks, and it's over. That's it. Tell me any other environmental health issue that you can end by turning off a answer, because this is something that we're doing to ourselves, unnecessarily poisoning ourselves with this stuff. So you can stop it. You can stop it tomorrow if you get the political will. But to get the political will, you need masses of people educated and organized. And that's what this meeting is about. It's the beginning of an educational process, and hopefully the beginning of an organization process. We have to organize to apply that 2 by 2 to the politician's head. Yes?
Is there a correlation between low iodine levels and low IQ and fluoride causing maybe not being able to absorb
Yes, there is a strange relationship which nobody has really clarified yet between a mixture of fluoride and iodine, a mixture of moderately high fluoride and low borderline iodine. That fluoride seems to make the problem of low borderline iodine worse. So in one study in China, they found a lowering of IQ in children at 0.88 parts per million of fluoride in children with borderline iodine deficiency. And that was that lowering of IQ was significantly lower than higher levels of fluoride with reasonable amounts of iodine. And we don't know the mechanism, how fluoride interferes with the thyroid function, but we're pretty certain it does, because doctors used to use fluoride to lower thyroid function in the 30s, 40s, and 50s in Argentina, France, and Germany. And the doses they used were pretty small. And there was a study done in the Ukraine in 1985 where they showed effect on thyroid function at 2.3 parts per million of fluoride in the water. And the outrageous thing is that even that whilst we have millions of people in the United States, particularly women, with low thyroid function, there's never been any attempt to see if this epidemic of hypothyroidism is in any way related to fluoridation status, fluoride exposure. Outrageous. And that's true of many other basic health concerns, which the literature should say. The literature on both animal studies and studies done in India and China should, waving these red flags, should say, you should do this study. You should do this study in the United States. They're not doing these studies in the United States. They're not doing them in Canada. They're not doing them in Ireland. They're not doing them in England. They're not doing them in Australia. They're not doing them in New Zealand. They're not doing it in any fluoridated country. The most basic things they're not doing. Yes?
Why is the case against fluoride that is met with so much more opposition than like asbestos or lead in commercial paint, stuff like that?
Okay, I tell you, there's a very simple answer to that. The asbestos promoters came in black hats. They were industry, money-grabbing industry. The promoters of fluoridation come in white coats. They are respectable dentists and doctors, AMAs and ADAs, and they have government power behind them, so much different. We love to go after industry, but we're not so good at going after these respectable outfits. Yes?
Why does the ADA promote it when you would think it'd be counter to their business, because less caries is less business?
Yeah, well,
plus,
that's if you...
How do you also pronounce Van Gogh?
Okay. Van Gogh. Ask the doctor. Gogh. You say Van Gogh. Oh, dreadful. Okay. The ADA has its seal of approval on every dental product that contains fluoride. It's the ADA telling this huge industry which sells toothpaste, mouthwash all over the planet. They have their imprimatur on it. And I suspect that when the lawsuits begin, when they finally nail down a little bit more than dental fluorosis, who's going to be sued? It's going to be the toothpaste manufacturers. It's going to be the ADA, who told everybody it was okay. So I think right now the toothpaste manufacturers hide behind the cloak of the ADA, and the ADA is hiding behind the authority of the CDC. They work in tandem. Yeah.
Is there any health risk to bathing in fluoridated water?
Good question. Some people, there is rumored to be a study which shows that fluoride is absorbed in a hot bath. If you have a hot bath, the pores open, and obviously the fluoride can't go through the skin, the waxy layers of the skin, but maybe in a hot bath when the pores open, the fluoride could go in. I've met a woman in Florida, this is anecdotal, who showed me pictures, bright colored photographs of what she looked like after she had a shower. And her great big red blotches under her arms, on her chest, and so on. And she said, I went to doctor after doctor trying to solve this problem. And no, I got all kinds of ointments, all kinds of medication. Nothing works. And then one day someone said to me, is your water fluoridated? She says, I don't know. and then she found out the water was fluoridated. So then she started having showers in a non-fluoridated community. I don't know how she worked that, but she did, and no problem. So this suggests to me, at least for this one individual, that fluoride, even in a shower, could get through and impact whatever produces this rosy coloration. Yes?
In a lot of situations they talk about the resistance to change being follow the money.
Yes.
Like who is benefiting from the bad signs?
Okay. There's a lot of candidates for this, and the last chapter in our book was trying to conjecture as to why. Why are they pushing so hard and continue to push so hard? Even as the science gets worse and worse and worse, from their point of view, they push harder and harder. Why? Well, 1 year before the US Public Health Service mysteriously endorsed fluoridation in 1950, before any of the trials had been completed, and before there was any significant health studies on any community, the US Public Health Service endorsed fluoridation, 1950. 1 year before that, the US Sugar Lobby, in its newsletter said, and this is the Sugar Research Foundation, which represented 133 sugar interests, from candy to cornflakes to sugar itself, said we need to find a way to reduce tooth decay without reducing sugar consumption. Then the sugar industry proceeded to fund professors at prestigious universities, nutrition departments, to go out around the country and to testify before Congress that sugar was a nutritious meal, that Coca-Cola was nutritious drink, and cookies, etc., were excellent nutrition. And these same people also promoted fluoridation. So they put the two together, pro-sugar, pro-fluoridation. And the classic example is Dr. Frederick Steyer, who earned millions of dollars, was the chairman of the nutrition department at Harvard University. And no one was more aggressive in the promotion of fluoridation than Fred Steyer. And nobody was more nasty to people opposed to fluoridation than Fred Steyer, who had like a weekly newspaper article. And another thing that Fred Steyer did is he attacked Rachel Carson when she published Silent Spring. He was also a member of the American Council on Science and Health, which is an industry-funded front that's never found a chemical that they didn't like. And they are still in action today, extolling the virtues of fluoridation and attacking anybody like Peter Vallone Jr., a councilman in New York City, had the audacity to recommend that they stop fluoridation in New York City. You wouldn't believe the language, the rhetoric that the ACSH delivered at Peter Vallone for suggesting that. So this American Council of Science and Health is funded by, you name it, the oil companies, the chemical industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the food industry. So you've got a lot to choose from there. Christopher Bright, this is an important question. Christopher Bright wrote a brilliant book, The Fluoride Deception. And if you want to save time, I did a 28-minute interview with Chris Bryson shortly after he wrote this book, explaining that the beginning of fluoridation was precipitated by the industries that produced fluoride as a pollutant, that were facing many lawsuits from farmers for the damage to their crops. And his thesis is that they wanted to change the image of fluoride from, at that time, the worst air pollutant in the United States, the pollutant that had damaged more agriculture than any other air pollutant, according to the US Department of Agriculture, said that. So they wanted to change the image of fluoride from nasty air pollutant to the stuff that's safe enough to put in your cornflakes, etc. And an interesting thing is, there were 3 different groups that discovered that fluoride caused dental fluorosis, 1931. And one of the researchers was H.V. Churchill, who was the chief researcher, chemist for Alcoa. And he found that fluoride caused dental fluorosis. In Chris Bryson's book, he says that that Churchill phones up dentists in Messina, which has a large aluminum smelter, Alcoa smelter, to see if there are cases of dental fluorosis in the children. And the answer was there were in Messina. What was the level in fluoride in the water in Messina? Very low. In other words, they knew, he knew, Alcoa knew, in 1931 that fluoride air pollution from aluminum smelters caused dental fluorosis. And what was worse, what could be worse for an industry to have a telltale biomarker of exposure to a nasty pollutant than that? So you can see it with the naked eye. You can see dental fluorosis. So if you see dental fluorosis amongst children, you say, well, where's the fluoride coming from? In those days, you look around for an aluminum smelter, a phosphate fertilizer plant, a steel industry, ceramics. You'd look for some industrial source. We don't do that anymore. And let me throw this out, and hopefully you won't immediately say I'm a conspiracy theorist, right? Because I'm not. But it's interesting. Is it feasible? Is it possibly feasible that if you're an industry and you're scared stiff that dental fluorosis is going to indicate you as the culprit, and that in addition to dental fluorosis, it's immediately also discovered sometime in the future that it's damaging bone and doing other serious things, not only to farmers and the animals, but also to your own workers. What's one thing you might consider? Fluoridate as much of the water supply as you possibly can, because if you do that, you can never point to an industrial source. Interesting, eh? Interesting thought. I'm not saying it's true. Yeah.
Anyway, a question and a comment on the floss and the rinse. Is that as bad as the drinking water?
The what?
Dental floss that has fluoride and the rinse that has fluoride. Is that as bad as the drinking water?
Well, if you drink the mouthwash, yes. The mouthwash is 500 parts per million. You drink that.
You don't swallow it, you're okay?
You don't. I wouldn't, because when you're swishing, that's not only swishing around your teeth. Some of it's going through the gums, and so especially if your child before your permanent teeth have come out, then you're going to increase your risk of
Same
death.
thing with dental floss is no good either.
Dental floss, I'm not sure just how much fluoride would be imparted with dental
Okay, and then
floss.
also I have one more comment. I have a dentist that for years there's been patients that do not get fluoride treatments when they clean their teeth.
Didn't.
Do not.
Yeah, well that's good. Find those dentists. There are quite
They
a...
would charge you for for fluoride treatment in your insurance if you do use it. But there's been patients, I quit using it because I had a friend that used to be a nurse and said that fluoride was poison.
Yeah.
So he does not do a fluoride treatment when I clean my teeth.
Let me answer a question before it's asked. If you ask me the question, which would I prefer, fluoride added to water or the use of fluoridated toothpaste? There's no question that I would opt for fluoridated toothpaste over water fluoridation. Now, if you ask me a second question, do you use fluoridated toothpaste? And my answer is I haven't used fluoridated toothpaste for 16 years. Since I've seen how nasty fluoride is, I don't want any near my body whatsoever. So the first order of business is get the fluoride out of the water. But before everybody jumps into the frying pan, we also need to get rid of fluoridated toothpaste, or at least make sure that people are warned about it. Yes. Oh no, you've answered. Yes.
Okay, isn't it logical to assume that, like, the fluoride that we consume is not just it's in our water, but anything that is produced with that water, that the foods that we consume, the plants that are grown with possibly fluoridated water, are we consuming it with anything else that we're eating? Like
Yeah. That's a good question. Okay, there are foods which are naturally high in fluoride. You have tea, naturally high, grows well in fluoridated soils. You have bones, any food that has bones. So fish bones high in fluoride, animal bones, chicken bones. Do not eat mechanically deboned meat. Try to stick to the whole meat, the whole chickens, not chicken patties and so on. Okay, so that's a natural source. Then in addition to that, you've got fluoride pesticides and you've got fluoride in fertilizers. So try to stick to organic food. if you can afford it, organic food, to eliminate the fluoride that way. But you're right. If a community is making up fruit juice and using water to dilute it, then it's going to have a high level. So fruit juice is high. If you have Coca-Cola companies, if you have beer companies in communities which are fluoridated, you're going to get about 1 part per million in those products, unless the company itself removes the fluoride with some reverse osmosis system. So you have to check with each company, or you have to get it measured. And also processed food. If you process food, it absorbs water, and yes. As far as the fluoride, my wife's a very keen organic gardener. So she was appalled to know that she's watering her garden with fluoridated water. But the uptake of fluoride into plants is very, it's not consistent. Some plants take it up, some plants don't. And it also depends upon the soil. Some soil hold on to it, some soils do not hold on to it. So there's no clear-cut answer to that, or no simple answer to that question. The US Department of Agriculture does publish a whole list of foodstuffs and the average level of fluoride in those foodstuffs, and you can calculate your exposure using that. Yeah?
Doctors always tell their patients who smoke, if you go on and smoke and take 20 years, if you stop completely, your body will recover and you'll be back, your lungs will be back to how it was as a non-smoker. Is there any such action with fluoride? I've been drinking fluoride water for 60 years. Is the damage done for me? That's what I'm saying.
The answer is probably most of it has been done, but the good news is that the fluoride that's in your bones will turn over, or at least some of it. Some of the fluoride, if it works deep into the bones, you've got it for a long time. But the fluoride that's going to the surface layers of the bone will come off. So if you stop the source of fluoride, the fluoride levels in your bones will come down. So the sooner you stop the sources of fluoride, the better it is for you. Yeah?
I think that any book on nutrition I've ever read says that fluoride is needed for hydroxyapatite in bone. Is that false?
That's false. There's no indication, they claim that there are some studies that indicate that fluoride, in addition to hardening the enamel, may strengthen the bone. But if that's the case, it's only up to a modest level. So if you have a strengthening of the bone, after a certain point, it then begins to weaken the bone and make the bones more brittle over time. So it's
the recommended levels now, are those levels safe? I couldn't give you those numbers off the top.
you can't say what's a safe level based upon concentration. The nearest we can get to it is to talk about safe doses. How many milligrams a day could cause bone fractures in this? And something I haven't mentioned, before you get to bone fractures, the first symptoms of fluoride's poisoning of the bone is just like arthritis. The symptoms are just like arthritis. They are stiffness of the joints, pains in the joints, pains in the bone themselves. These are the first symptoms, very definitely documented extensively in India and China. We have millions of people with arthritis in this country, and again, no health authority is looking to see if there's a relationship between how much fluoride you're exposed to over a lifetime and whether or not that causes or exacerbates arthritis. Not doing it. Yes, behind.
You spoke of arthritis.
What's that?
Arthritis.
Arthritis, yeah.
The Latin word means pain in the joints. Am I correct?
Pain in the joints, yes.
The arthritis, the Latin word means pain in the joints. Correct?
Yeah. Yeah, and those are the first symptoms that you get with skeletal fluorosis.
I have a question now. What would be the best water on the market that you know of to be safe to drink? The best water on the market to be safe to drink?
Well, if you want to be absolutely safe, you should get distilled water. But please, if you do that, make sure you couple it with the nutrients. Right now, I'm living off reverse osmosis water, and I'm not happy about it, because I know every time I drink reverse osmosis water, I'm not getting the calcium and magnesium that I would normally get from most drinking water systems. So basically, if you're going to go that route, either distilled water or reverse osmosis water, make sure you're eating the right diet, lots of vegetables, a lot of green vegetables to get those minerals. And I'm sure most books in nutrition will tell you which vegetables, etc., you need to eat to get these things. Or, if that's too difficult, then make sure you take the mineral supplements. What we need in a health store is somebody to produce a packet of minerals that says, this packet of minerals is designed for people that are not drinking tap water, but drinking distilled water or reverse osmosis water. What?
You can buy that.
Yeah, little packets of stuff?
Well, actually, bottles. It comes in liquid form.
Oh, okay.
So many drops in a gallon.
Excellent. There we go. That's it. Okay, I'm glad that...
Remineralize your reverse osmosis.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad to hear that. That's the way to go then. That's the secure way to go. The other way is to, in Europe and Canada, the bottled water is a requirement to have all the mineral levels in it. All the metal ions, all the negative ions in it. Same in Europe. Europe and Canada, yes. The United States, no. There's no requirement to say what minerals are in that bottled water. You can call the 800 number and ask them. And more people should. Yes, I want to make sure that everybody's answered the question first before we go to the ones asking second.
Have you heard of a machine from China? I believe it's called Kangen. Kangen water?
From Japan.
Just from Japan?
Kangen. It's an islander.
No, I haven't heard of that.
It's a medical instrument for producing.
Right.
All I urge you, please, is not simply to protect yourself, but to protect the whole community by getting this fluoride out. Yes?
My question would be, once we worry about the fluoride and the reverse osmosis of the distilled water, what about the containers we're keeping this in? Should we keep it in glass? Should we buy distilled in plastic bisphenol A bottle?
Another good question, because there's a great deal of concern about bisphenol A leaching out of plastics. The big blue containers, I think, are polycarbonate. I'm not sure if that has bisphenol A in it or not. But yes, if you're concerned about that, use glass, but then it's heavy. Those big glass containers are heavy. And now we're back in... we got fluoride out of Canton, New York. It took us 7.5 years. And it was so wonderful to be able to drink the tap water. Now we moved to Binghamton, New York, and it's fluoridated again. So we're back to this business of going to the big superstores and bringing back all these containers of reverse osmosis water. It's a pain in the butt, and it would be even more painful if they were made of glass. So I think it's better to, again, check with somebody that's into this and see what the right container to get, which gives you water but doesn't give you plastic additives as well. Anybody that hasn't asked a question? Yes, you.
Testing, you mentioned that some reverse osmosis systems take out the fluoride and some don't. Is there an inexpensive, reliable that we could send it into?
Oh, you could send it into. You could try to find a laboratory that does the testing and send them in a sample. Shouldn't cost you more than about $25. The only reason that I know about that reverse osmosis is there's a chemist in San Diego called Richard Sauerhaber. He teaches at a community college there. And he's been testing all the equipment himself, setting it up and measuring the fluoride in the water before and afterwards. And he was the one that told me it depends upon the flow rate, the model, etc., etc., etc.
I was fortunate my house that I bought came with a reverse osmosis system. But then my other question is, for my shower, is there a filter that you'd recommend so I'm not standing in the sun?
I think they exist. I've never used one.
Know which one. Does anybody here know what they suggest?
Well, I have one at home, but I can't recall.
Hey, this brings up a point. The reason, when you push it, the most emotive argument for promoting fluoridation is that this is supposed to help poor kids, poor families, where the most tooth decay is concentrated. But in my view, that's a really pernicious doctrine, because it's precisely the poor families that cannot do what we're talking about. They cannot afford all these avoidance measures. They have to drink it. And also, we know that fluoride is most toxic if you've got poor nutrition. If you've got low calcium, low vitamins, low protein. That's where fluoride strikes hardest. And where are you likely to find poor nutrition in the United States? Answer, in low-income families. So they are being targeted for fluoridation, and yet they are the most vulnerable and they can't avoid it. It's not equitable at all.
Let's take 2 more questions.
Two more
from the
questions.
people, and I want to do some house cleaning before
Yes.
we wrap up.
Yes, yes, yes.
You mentioned one of the studies, they took urine analysis, and
Yes.
that's where they found the fluoride.
Yeah.
Is that common? I mean, is there,
Oh, yes.
is there, you know, you talked about the white coats.
Yeah.
Well, we go back to the white coats. If we're going to the doctor, we're saying every time that we want to be tested and see what our,
Yeah.
you know, in our urologyst, I want to see what my fluoride level is.
As far as I
And
can
bring it
know.
back to them and bring it back to them. And
Yeah, I think it's good. As far as I know, there is nowhere that there's any kind of comprehensive testing of fluoride in urine. There's no one doing it. In fact, there's no comprehensive monitoring of the fluoride levels in our bones, in our blood, or in our urine. At this point, we should have millions of data points. We have practically none. But there's nothing to stop you asking, if you have a urine test, what the levels of fluoride are in your urine. When they did this with thousands of people in England, they were amazed at how high the levels were in the urine. And the rule of thumb is about 50% of the fluoride that you take in each day is excreted in the urine. And so you've got a rough measure of how much fluoride is coming into your body when you measure the fluoride in your urine. So yes, ask your doctor for that measure. But doctors, you see, this is one of the problems. When you put a subject off the radar screen, when you tell medical students there is no debate on fluoridation, it's perfectly safe, it's not toxic, no problem, then doctors are not being trained to recognize the toxic effects of fluoride, especially for sensitive people. They're not being trained to recognize that we should be measuring the fluoride in the urine. It's very dangerous when politics interferes with science, especially science which is supposed to be determining health policy. That lady with the baby, very important.
Is there any difference between artificially added fluoride and naturally occurring fluoride?
Oh, that is a $64,000 question, and it's not easy to answer. The simplest answer is what I gave you. The industrial grade fluoride is contaminated. It has arsenic in it. The natural fluoride doesn't have that, not typically. Normally, when you find fluoride naturally occurring, it's usually accompanied with high levels of calcium. Maybe 100 times level and higher than the fluoride. That calcium is to a certain extent protective against fluoride's toxicity for the simple reason if you have a lot of calcium and fluoride together, it's not so easy to take it up into the bloodstream. And so a lot of that fluoride ends up in the feces, goes straight through the system if you have a lot of calcium with it. So there is a case where the certain natural fluorides are safer because there's a lot of calcium there. But I have to agree with the industry up to a point when they argue that by the time you've diluted this 23% solution of hexafluorosilicic acid, 180,000 to 1, that this complex of silicon and fluoride breaks down to free fluoride ion and hydrogen ions. And if you neutralize it with sodium hydroxide, what you then have is essentially hydrated silica and a solution of sodium fluoride. And at this point, there shouldn't be a difference between this fluoride solution and something that you've made up with sodium fluoride, etc. However, there is one little caveat on that. The study which showed complete dissociation of this hexafluorosilicic acid with dilution made it clear that it was pH dependent. And below a pH of about 4, there was a persistent silicon fluoride complex, which would then be different from the fluoride that's being tested in animal studies, etc., the sodium fluoride that's tested. This silicon fluoride complex will be different and may have different biological properties. But the pH of water is about 7 to 8, it's usually slightly alkaline, so it shouldn't be there. However, what happens when the hydrated silica and the fluoride hits the stomach? The stomach has a pH between 1 and 2. Will it not recombine to form this silicon pentafluoride complex? And would we then not be dealing with a different species from the one that's being tested, the sodium fluoride? And also, how much association would you have in carbonated drinks, acid drinks? I doubt if the pH level goes. Anybody know what the pH of carbonated drinks is? I should know, right? I suspect it's not much lower than 5. So to me, the bigger issue is that if you use industrial grade hexafluorosilicic acid, you're going to get arsenic, and that's a known carcinogen. You should not be putting that in the drinking water.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, quick takeaways in case we have to take off. There will be a meeting here January 28th, 2 weeks from today, from 6 to 8 p.m. in this library. I'm not sure it's going to be this specific room. Is it this room? Do we know yet?
No, we don't know yet.
We don't know yet, but you'll see it downstairs from 6 to 8 p.m., January 28th. And the intention of the meeting is to start coordinating a grassroots effort to create some change here where we live. Just hold on 1 second, please. All right. So the quick update on what the status is in Scott County, and I apologize for those of you who are from Illinois that are here. I don't have enough knowledge about the Illinois side of the river yet, but that is that we essentially have everybody pointing fingers to everybody else. The water company tells us that it's the municipality's concern and jurisdiction. And if you go to havethedebate.com, the website, you can see there's a high-res scan of the one-page document from 1952, which is the original enacting contract between the Iowa Department of Health, the City of Davenport, and the Iowa Water Company. That's what it was known as back then. So there are 3 parties to the matter in Scott County at this point, technically and legally. However, the water company says, well, now we fluoridate all these other municipalities in Scott County too, so for us to stop, you got to get them all on the same page. Sorry, it's their problem now. Then when you go to the city, in 2007, Tom Warner, the city attorney, wrote a memo that articulated that, hey, it's not our problem, it's the DNR's problem. It's the state's problem. You need to lobby the state. And recently, Mike Angelos was talking to the DNR via email, and they put in writing, sorry, it's not our problem, it's the water company's problem. So we have a perfect circle of just denial that they are actually engaged. Now, with Paul's help, what we're going to do by the time he leaves Wednesday morning is we're going to have a series of hard questions that need to be answered. And the purpose of that meeting on the 28th is to get people assembled to say, okay, you live in Bettendorf, here's 10 questions that need to be asked and answered, and we need 10 people at public business at the Bettendorf Council meeting, so those 10 questions get asked. We have repetition, we have bodies, it's not just one person, it's a lot of people. The same thing needs to happen in Davenport as well. That's going to be the purpose of that meeting on January 28th, is to line that up. It's, you know, and we need more people on the track, folks. We need more people engaged in this process. And if we can't take control of what's in our water supply where we live, the power of the wrist, I'm going to steal that from you, by the way. That's really good. I mean, that's it. That's all. This is all we have to do. Yeah. It's an amazing opportunity to actually do some environmental good here. So that's practice. Yeah, just turn it off. Another small piece of housekeeping. Super Liberty is a local group of activists that got this together. We have a health freedom forum that we started and so forth. Superliberty.com. You can check that out. We've covered the hard costs for Dr. Connett to be here. We'd like to send him home with a great donation from the Quad Cities for his efforts. To that point, we have
the Fluoride, not to me personally.
Yes, to the Fluoride Action Network, to his organization. Which, by the way, if you haven't seen fluoridealert.org, the website, check it out. It's a phenomenal website. It's extremely resourceful. There's videos of pediatricians who are talking. I mean, he's got all this. Yeah.
I want to give these away.
Yeah.
Okay. I want anybody that is going to put this on their car and not their refrigerator, please feel free to take one of these. And this is the hard copy of the professional perspectives on water fluoridation. If you haven't seen this, this is the best we've got. This is the most powerful tool. It's 15 scientists. including Arvid Carlson, who you heard about, 3 members of the National Research Council, 2 former employees of the EPA, former dentists who formerly supported fluoridation have now switched over, explaining why fluoridation is a bad idea. Here's what I recommend. Get one of these and make as many copies as you can. Just find somebody young, they know how to do it. Make as many copies as you can and give them to your friends. It's so unintrusive. In the privacy of your own home, you can look at this. You might even try your dentists and doctors with this. So,
better yet, give it to your city council person.
Yeah.
All right, and ask them to watch it.
So, bumper sticker on your car, DVD to make copies with, and the jackpot is if anyone here can get it on public access television.
Yes.
You have your, okay?
So hold on 1 second, hold on. So Steve has the donation jar over there. He's going to put it on the back shelf back there. You can make a check out to Fluoride Action Network, cash, or you can go to fluoridealert.org and you can help support. We want to send him back with a great contribution to his organization. Now,
And do you have codes for sale here?
No. Nearly last on order, and thank you for your patience this evening, is grab this blue flyer, grab a handful of them on your way out. It says, how can I get involved? It has some suggestions. It also lists emails for the Scott County Board of Supervisors, Eldridge, LeClaire, Davenport, and Bettendorf. Again, we need an Illinois leader to do the same thing in Illinois. Tomorrow night at 6:30 at the Moline Public Library is the next presentation. HaveTheDebate.com is a website. You can go info@HaveTheDebate.com to get on.
One of each, please. Thank you very much.
Everybody should. I want to send it to the dentist. I have a question.
Yeah, in a moment. Let me get these dished out before people can what the DVD is for.
Todd?
We'll have more copies.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
You want the bumper sticker? No. On your car, not on your kitchen.